My name is Dan Hupkowicz, and I am the Global COE Lead for Delivery Excellence at Rizing HCM. Today, I am joined by other Rizing HCM Center of Excellence leads to discuss some of our thoughts on the various first half 2023 SAP SuccessFactors release items. First, let's go around the table and have everyone introduce themselves. Let's start with Shannon.
Hi, everyone. Shannon Ippolito. I am the Center of Excellence Lead for Managed Services.
Hello, everyone. I'm Abhishek Jain. I'm Center of Excellence Lead for Core HR and Payroll.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim McAlpine. I'm the Center of Excellence Lead for Operations and Platform.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Abbott. I'm the Center of Excellence Lead for Time and Benefits.
Hi, everyone. This is Fabian Hernandez. I'm a Principal Consultant for Recruiting and Onboarding in Professional Services.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Stewart, and I'm the Center of Excellence Lead for the Talent Management modules.
And hello, everyone. My name is Jorge Arribas. I'm the Center of Excellence Lead for Technical Services and SAP Workzone.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Now let's get this chat started. First, I'd like to have Shannon discuss a few overall thoughts on general release management. Shannon?
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. So as we know, those who are used to going through these release processes, it's a lot to go through, a lot of information out there. For those who are new to this process, welcome. I wanted to just talk about a few points for you. The first one is with regards to the SAP What's New viewer. It's excellent, this release. I have to give kudos to the SAP SuccessFactors team that put together the documentation this release. I've been doing this for well over 10 years, and this just really impressed me this time. And I do want to quickly show an example of what I mean. So the What's New viewer is where all of the release notes for this release are. And it has links to go to see more, which gives you just amazing documentation on each of these release items. Obviously, some items are going to have more information versus others, right, depending upon the complexity. But here's just an example to show you. Lots of information here. Many of the items have great interactive tables and charts for you to scroll through. So one of the things, right, is, you know, some visual changes, but you can easily come here and do some filtering so you can target your modules that you are interested in. And as you scroll down, you'll just see there's just good information. Also, I want to quickly call out that there is this new enablement field. Previously, we've been used to seeing universal opt-in, opt-out. Now there's a new enablement field here to show you. Is it automatically on, meaning there's no configuration steps for you. Customer configured means there's actions that you would need to take as a customer to configure. And then there's two other options, partner enablement, product enablement as well. So really encourage everyone to come and look at this detailed information as you're walking through your release items. Also want to highlight testing is so crucial. You want to ensure that you are testing those automatically on features within your modules. You want to unit test some of your most common transactions, especially if you have Employee Central or Performance, launch a form, transfer somebody into a new job. And then really look at that end-to-end testing, more specifically for those larger organizations that have full suite, recruiting, onboarding, Employee Central, right? You want to make sure you are having your applicant, hiring them, pushing them through, and making sure there just is no issues or bumps along the way. Then definitely use the resources that are available to you. Out on the SuccessFactors community site, there are great links and information. The on-demand customer Q&A sessions that SAP holds, those start on May 9th, so make sure you go out there and register for those. As well as Rizing.com. Come and visit our site. We have lots of good information out there for you as well. So good luck on your journey, and I wish you the best this release.
Thanks, Shannon. That's great to hear about the What's New viewer, and thanks for pointing out the resources as well. Next up is Abhishek for an update on Employee Central. Over to you, Abhishek.
Thanks, Dan. So for this release, 1H 2023, I would say that a lot of announcements that SAP has released are from the suggestions and ideas from the customer community. And again, kudos to SAP to listening to the customers and their feedback and coming up with lots of announcements in that space. So I'll be covering Employee Central and Employee Central Payroll here. And obviously, we'll be covering few topics. Some of the important topics that I feel that we can discuss here is starting with the configurable decimal places for pay component groups. And this is the item where the configurable options are now same as what we have for pay components. Like we have possible decimal places from 0 to maximum 5 decimal places. With the default value being a 3, standard out of box from SAP SuccessFactors. However, since it's configurable, it's flexible enough for a client to decide and accordingly configure based on their needs. With this announcement, there's changes across the UI whenever a transaction is executed for compensation, like in people profile or edit screen, take action or the history screen. So we can now view the decimal places for pay component groups as well as within the compensation widgets. So one of the recommendation here would be like, it's best to have the number of decimal places consistent for both pay component and pay component groups so that we see the same decimal number behavior for both the objects. Next item I'll be covering here is the hire templates. So this feature of hire templates is available for, I think, quite some time, maybe a year or so. But this time around, SAP has extended the hire template feature for concurrent employment, wherein now the wizard or the screens for adding any concurrent employment is configurable. However, some of the information is still mandatory, like, you cannot create a concurrent employment without job information. So that's mandatory. But in addition to that, there is an option available, like, if you need to add any custom MDF or in case like, we need to add some additional personal information. So it's completely configurable rather than hard-coded in the previous releases. With this announcement, SAP also brings up the permission capability for contingent worker templates. So again, when we configuring the hire wizard or hire template for contingent worker, it is now possible to restrict the access to certain groups. Like, if there are a group of HR BP, then you can restrict like only within, say, one of the location, they are allowed to follow the contingent worker hiring process, then we can restrict the access to that particular group or location only. So that feature is now available. The last item for Employee Central I'll be covering is the multiple payouts option. So this is within the time off functionality of Employee Central. So before this release, it was not possible to create more than one payout for any employee. Like, if employee is being terminated and I want to pay them out their balance leave for 2 different balances, like, something for vacation and something for personal leave. So these are the 2 balances, but there was a restriction that we can create only 1 payout. But with this release, SAP is allowing a flexibility where we can create more than 1 payout for 1 single day, and same information can be sent to payroll. In addition to this feature for time off, there's one more feature that I would like to highlight here. And this is more for, I would say, we as a consultant, right? So moving the configuration from one system to another. So it was more of like, an export and import process for us to move the configuration for time management objects, especially. But this time around, SAP has announced it, and it is now possible to do a system-to-system migration of the time management objects. And this is available via the Configuration Center tool. So in addition to this announcement that we have discussed, there are many announcements in Employee Central and Employee Central space, like I would say the new time of print form feature, wherein we can generate or create time forms with all the absences, and many others. Obviously, we won't be able to cover everything here, but yes, as Shannon mentioned earlier, we can go through that in the What's New viewer. Next, I'll be jumping into the EC payroll space now. And for EC's payroll, I'll be covering a couple of items. The first one being the single Employee Central to multiple ECP connections. So this is possible with an announcement that SAP has done in payroll system configuration MDF. So SAP has now added an association with a legal entity. So what this does is, with this option now available, it is now possible to connect one Employee Central system with two different EC payroll systems by means of legal entity. So we can have one EC payroll system for legal entity based out of US, and we can have another EC payroll system connected to another legal entity, say, for example, based out of UK. So this option is now available, which was not possible in the earlier releases. In addition to that, SAP also brings the announcement for push replication. The feature of push replication was available for quite some time now. And push replication is where employee is hired, rehired, or terminated. For this feature, system automatically replicates the data rather than waiting for the scheduled job to execute. The only issue with this execution was there was no log generated by the system. So if anything goes wrong, we cannot go into ECP backend and view the log. But that that is now available with this release, where SAP has now made the application log available for push replication, meaning any hire, rehire, or terminations going in automatically. We can see the log if there are any replication failures. And one thing to note with all the EC payroll functionalities, that we have to wait until the production release when the synchronization pack, which is HR support pack B9, is released. Only then all those EC payroll related features will be available, and only then we'll be able to test those in our systems. With that, I would say happy testing to everyone. So as Shannon mentioned, keep on testing whatever your transactions are. That will help to identify any issues that you may encounter in production. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Abhishek. Quite a few updates in the areas of EC and EC payroll. So thanks again for those updates. Now we will be heading over to Tim, who will be walking us through time tracking and platform updates.
Thanks, Dan. So starting with time tracking, there were a few improvements here, mostly around being able to access the information. So the first point on there is around reporting of time events. So they've enabled a report in through People Analytics and Report Stories that allows you to view the time events that have occurred for clock in and clock out. That gives you approval status, date, and the source, whether it was through a notification coming in from an integration or a punch card type scenario. So in addition to that, as well as the reporting, they've also enabled an OData API service to export the time events as well, which is obviously going to be quite useful for being able to access that data outside of time tracking. In addition, they've also enabled a feature to copy timesheet entries across from one period to another. So if you're doing a similar pattern across your work week, from one week to the next, being able to copy that across is now enabled, which obviously makes the usage of the tool as well as the adoption quite good as well. Holiday work pattern is also something that they've introduced this round. So what this means is being able to define how those holidays are applied to you as an individual. So you will have a holiday calendar. You can then define the holiday pattern, whether or not you can work on those days without having to be generically defined, saying that a holiday is a time off kind of scenario. So that's quite handy for those people that are working on those holiday periods and being able to define a more centralized holiday calendar. They've also introduced some automation around breaks and rest periods. So you'll be able to define breaks that go over a certain period. So if you're working for 8 hours, depending on government requirements, you may be required to have a 30-minute break, and it will automatically be able to add that in for you. And the same thing for rest periods in between shifts. So when you have a dedicated amount of time that has to be met between one shift and the next. So if you finish at 6 a.m., you need to have a 12-hour period between the next shift. You can validate against that now as well. Switching over to platform, one of the big things about this release is there were a lot of minor visual changes, which taken in individuals does represent some minor changes, but looking at it as a whole does change the look of the site. Not significantly, but enough to make a fairly sort of impact on the changes there. So one thing to make note is make sure that for each of the modules, you look at these design changes within the release, the What's New viewer. There are quite a lot, and it is split out by module, so it will give you an item by item list on what has changed. But looking at it, just looking between what's in preview and what's in production, looking at the same thing, there is some changes that will require potentially some updates to screens and job aids from a client perspective. One of the next things is around the homepage, around the quick action items. So the quick actions are defined usually by what permissions you have and what functions you've enabled on the system. These are now customizable. So you will be able to create up to 5 custom quick actions, which has come through as a number of clients wanting to be able to create these. This will allow you to more customize that action bar, which previously was fairly automatic and defined that way. You'll also be able to change the order of those actions within the system as well. There's also some theme updates. So Belize and Quartz is becoming deprecated. So they're no longer going to be available. And then they're adding in the Horizon theme, which will be automatically turned on for new clients. So something to make note, theme changes for new instances, you may see that automatically turned on. It's obviously switchable after the fact, but it does come as default. So something to take a look at, especially if you're still using some of those old themes. Now's the time to move across to the new one or define a custom one. Along the MDF route, they do have implemented now a MDF data file import size limit of 500 gig. So importing files in through MDF is now limited to that size. You can, anything over that size, which is usually few and far between. We're looking at probably up towards the million records count, would have to be done through SFTP in that fashion. So it's not, it actually comes up with a warning now that says if the file is over 500 gig, it won't allow you to do it through the UI. And then the last one is around the rule assignment export list. This is quite handy for looking at an assessment of the system, how these rules are being used. Within that rules engine, you'll be able to now click on an export assignment, which gives you a list of all the rules that are currently assigned to objects within the system, which is quite handy for looking at how those rules are being used. And like we said before, there are a lot of updates this round, so make sure you do go and take a look at the What's New viewer and review everything for these modules. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that update. We will now head over to Kelly to hear about global benefits.
Thank you so much, Dan. So global benefits in this particular release has a lot of shifting and changing that's happening. However, the real material information comes to a long-awaited change with the ability to look at an employee level error for employees that have inconsistent data whenever you're loading it. Benefits master data is loaded in batch form, and these are many married chained files that read one from another. And before this change, we did not have the ability to look at an employee level of what record was really airing out the whole batch. And now we do, with the addition of the troubleshoot mode for batch. You could switch that on to a yes while loading data into the system, and it will give you an employee level read of inconsistent data. What SAP is meaning by inconsistent data is really easy. For instance, if an employee lists their dependents with only a single dependent, we'll say a spouse, then they select that they want employee and family for all of their medical insurance. Well, you're missing some family members, right? So that inconsistent data throughout all of those files really are the key for showing you which record is airing out. More so over the rest of the updates that you're going to find in the viewer are really centered around enterprise updates coming to the module as a whole. Because the module is in the middle of a massive construction undertaking for the functionality and the usability of the UI, with a real heightened focus on the United States, there are some foundational Lego blocks in the back of the system that kind of need to move around in order to make that happen. These are just shifting this year for the old location of the old Lego blocks to deprecate next year. However, we're keeping an eye on it. The hope of the new release of the new UI would be in later this year. So nothing that we saw was a roadblocker for really any of our customers, but just really highlighting the benefit, which really does impact all of our customers, of that employee level master data or job data changes for errors. Thank you so much for your time. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Kelly. It's good to hear about those updates. Fabian is next with talent updates. Over to you, Fabian.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so let's take a look at the enhancements related to the talent acquisition modules, which is recruiting and recruiting marketing first. So for these ones, most of the new enhancements are directly from the customer community. So those are pretty interesting. Let's start with the first one. The first one is related to data privacy consent statement. This is a very common issue. That was a very common issue with Quick Apply. Whenever you try to apply to a job and you already had an account, you were blocked. To continue, you had to go back and log in and then accept the data privacy consent statement. So it's a very specific scenario, but it did happen. So now they have fixed this so that if you happen to have already applied in the past and the data privacy consent statement was updated and then you hit apply, you no longer you're no longer blocked. You're actually gonna get prompted to reaccept the new version of the data privacy consent statement. So that's also, a very common issue. So that's a great enhancement here. The second one was related to a single level pick list improve. So it has to do more an enhancement related to the user experience, especially beneficial for those customers that are using pick lists with a lot of values. This enhancement simply means that the users in the application, especially your candidates, when they have a pick list, they can start typing using the type ahead functionality or feature. So they can start typing rather than scrolling through a long list of values. They can just simply start typing and the system will search for suitable values that will match. That is available for the application, meaning that also available for recruiters when they're looking at the application from the SuccessFactors side. And let's go to the next one. This is about enhancement of the forward as applicant for evergreen requisitions. This is another one that is a very specific situation, very specific scenario, but it does happen. So if you happen to be using the functionality, especially for those countries in which you have a lot of regulations about visibility for candidates, there's a functionality called candidate visibility, which you allow candidates to say, I only want my application to be visible to recruiters of my own country or things like that. When you enable that functionality, in the past, you were not able to allow candidates to be forwarded in evergreen requisitions to a child requisition because of that restriction or that option selected by the candidate. So this enhancement is basically to get rid of that. So going forward, you will be able to forward a candidate from an evergreen requisition to a child requisition, regardless of the visibility option that was selected by the candidate. The last one on recruiting is the replacement of Google Universal Analytics for career sites. So basically, Google is replacing the Universal Analytics with Google Analytics 4. So if you have been using the older version, you do need to go and update the credentials in the Career Site Builder. So basically, this is just about that. All right, let's now move into onboarding. Onboarding does have quite a long list of enhancements, so I do recommend you to go through them. We picked the most important ones here, but there's actually quite a long list that I recommend to go through to see which ones can impact you. The first one is related to ability to be able to configure a due date for new hire task. So basically, in the past, the due date for all the tasks assigned to your onboardees were always the same as the start date. You were not able to modify that. So they changed that so that now you can customize it. You can say the due date for the tasks assigned for the new hire can be 10 days before hire date or something to that effect. So with this is great because as the due date is now configurable, you will be able to control or remind your new hires about upcoming deadlines more efficiently. Before, it was always the start date. So sometimes they had that risk that new hires would not be completing that on time. And now, because you can move the due date, you can drive all the notifications and reminders about those tasks so they can be reminded on time so they can finish their task on time. And we know this is important because if they don't finish their paperwork, that blocks additional or subsequent tasks, like being able to hire them and provisioning equipment and all of that. So that's why this, even though it seems small, it actually can be very powerful to ensure that your onboardees are finishing their task on time. The second one is related to rehire with new employment on legal entity transfer. This is an answer to a long issue related to not being able to transfer an employee when there's an international transfer from a different country or between legal entities. So they have modified or enhanced onboarding to be able to support this scenario. Basically, long story short, what you have to do is you still need to terminate the employee with a future date. And then in the new, in the application as a candidate, that internal candidate, basically you need to put the hire date or the start date to be the next date after the person has been terminated. With this combination of dates, the system will identify this as a international transfer or a legal entity transfer, and you will be able to initiate onboarding with that person without them having to use a different account. And basically, on day one, basically for this let's say, international transfer, they will be able to log into the homepage and they will be able to use a new feature called the context switcher. The context switcher will allow them to switch between the old employment in which they have a future termination and then switch into the new employment, which is a future start date. And when they are in SuccessFactors with the new employment, they will be able to complete their onboarding activities like the paperwork or sign documents. So that makes it a little bit easier for the onboardee to be able to complete their onboarding, still keeping the same access in SuccessFactors. And the last one, which I think is my favorite out of all these enhancements, is the configuration of new hire templates for onboarding. So basically, it means if you remember when you are trying to complete your paperwork as a new hire, you see all those different portlets. You know, you're filling out your national ID, your emergency contacts, bank details, and so forth. So the new hire templates will allow you to customize this screen and build your own blocks to say, okay, for this type of hires, I want to include only the personal data, emergency contacts, and that's it. And this for the other one, I want to include that in addition to payment details or payment information. So you can build different new hire templates. You can have a business rule to drive the logic to say which hire will be assigned the correct template. But the best of this feature is the fact that you can include MDF objects in these new hire templates. In the past, when you were filling out your paperwork and the easy portlets, MDFs were not supported. So you couldn't really do anything there. You have to create a new object, which we call the additional data collection or custom data collection. But with this enhancement, you don't have to do that anymore. You can add the MDF object directly to the new hire template. You get rid of the additional data collection. You might still need it for other reasons, but at least for the purpose of filling out the MDF, you don't need it anymore. So you are actually allowing the new hire to fill out all the paperwork in one single step, including MDF objects. So that information, when we finish the hire of that employee, that flows directly into employee profile. So fast forward under day one, you will see that MDF object pre-populated in their employee profile. And yeah, that's the last one. And as I said, there's a bit more that are also available in this release. So I invite you to take a look at the release notes about in the, how do you say, the new hire in the, sorry, I missed the word.
The What's New viewer.
The What's New viewer, thank you. All right, so that is all from my side, and back to you, Dan.
Quite a few updates in these areas as well, and I'm sure customers will be happy to see. Thanks again, Fabian. Heather is next with some updates on talent management.
Perfect, thanks, Dan. So we're going to start with performance and goals, and at the top of our list is the latest goal management version. As you've probably noticed within the last several releases, SuccessFactors has continued to put forward enhancements or improvements to the latest goal management that close some gaps when compared to the V12 version. And so just a handful of those to call attention to. First of all, when you go into your main menu, you're now going to see both performance goals and development goals clustered under the same choice in the home menu. So that's a bit of a navigation change. It also now allows for copying goals from prior year goal plans, provided that they're on latest goal management templates. It does now support milestone capabilities as well as the legal scan library and, legal scan functionality and the goal library functionality. So that's a really nice gap closure on that one. It also gives the ability for managers and employees to leave comments on goals via the mobile app. So definitely check out the list of the gap closures with this release as a part of the What's New viewer, and we'll watch for more to come in subsequent releases as well. We did want to call attention to some deprecation and sunset plans for two of the tools that you see listed here: 360, multi-rater feedback forms, and continuous performance management, or CPM. We just want to bring that forward to you because the legacy version of CPM, for instance, is going to be going into end of maintenance just about 12 months from now. So you've got some time to make the transition over. I think you'll find that the user interface and usability of the newest version of CPM is a real improvement. So do make some plans if you are using CPM to make that switch. And if you're considering putting CPM in place, I think you'll be happy with the newest version there. From a 360 perspective, the legacy version of that template is going to be coming to a close sooner. It's in end of maintenance in June, and it will go away entirely and sunset in November. So if you're using 360 forms with the old template, I'd encourage you to make plans to get switched over to the newest template for that this year. And as Tim had mentioned earlier, there are some aesthetic or visual enhancements that are happening in a variety of places across the suite. And you will notice those if you go into in-progress performance forms. For instance, in your test instance today, things that'll pop out at you is that your section headers are in a different font and they pop more. They've got a bold font to them. You'll see some difference with the iconology. So your action icons now stand out more on the form. And some things are maybe just slightly moved on the form in terms of where you're used to seeing them. They might move from left to right on the screen, but it's important that you have a chance to take a look at those so that you can respond to employee questions that may come up once this is available in production. And we're going to switch and talk a little bit about succession and CDP as a segment. Primarily, we're going to highlight some changes that are happening to mentoring, much like latest goal management. Mentoring continues to get a lot of energy coming out of each release, with improvements, some coming out of customer enhancements requests. First thing I'll call attention to is now when a mentor is going through the sign-up process and they see a list of possible mentees, or pardon me, mentors, they're going to be able to choose from a longer list. Previously, they would see 10. Now they could see up to 100. So that's a nice enhancement. Also, mentoring is now available on both the Android and iOS platforms for the mobile apps. So that's something that allows employees to take advantage of that utility while they're away from their desks. So that's a nice enhancement there. They've also made some improvements that allow you to actually edit your notifications, which I think will be a nice enhancement to mentor administrators that want to perhaps customize more of the content of the messages going out to participants. So if we pivot and talk about compensation, so also some nice new functionality. So they have added in this release the functionality that allows administrators to recall back compensation statements that might need some sort of an edit. So that capability is coming out with this release. And basically, it's going to allow you to take it out of completed status, bring it back into an in-progress status, and at that point, it will be automatically recalled, allowing you to make edits and then push it back into an in-progress step to go forward. Handful of main call-outs on that. You do need to enable that capability within a particular compensation statement before you launch and put those into use. So you want to take proactive action to put that into place. And then the last piece there related to comp is the ability to review field change history. So if you have some interest in seeing how certain pieces of data have changed with comp planners over time inside various worksheets, you can do that again. You need to pre-enable that, and you can set that change history for up to 5 fields, I believe. So some really nice capabilities added there. From a learning perspective, we're going to recap a handful there as well. They've made some enhancements so that you can now receive reminders via Microsoft Teams based on an integration between SAP SuccessFactors and Office 365. So definitely, if you think that would be helpful for your end users, that's something to consider. It does involve some configuration, so please do check out the What's New viewer for more detailed instructions on what's necessary to enable that capability. Also, we want to call attention to some changes that are coming forward for any clients that use WebEx Meeting Center. There is some alternate configuration that's going to be needed in order to continue to support that. So do also point to the What's New viewer to look at the specific details around that. There is some configuration needed on the client side and within Admin Center to make that possible so that it's sustainable going forward. And then the last piece that we want to call attention to is that the new course home experience is now enabled by default and it's opt-out as of this release. So if you haven't already made that switch, the system is going to be pushing that into the environment for you. And again, then you would have to proactively opt out after this release. So that's the list from a talent management perspective. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks again, Heather. Appreciate the updates. And last but not least, we have Jorge covering integrations and Workzone. Over to you, Jorge.
Thanks, Dan, and welcome everyone. So we're going to start talking through some of the highlights when it comes to integration and technical services. To start off from the first topic, some deprecations. The first and probably most important one is about the HTTP basic authentication deprecation for APIs, whether these are OIT data or SF API ones. This has been sitting through a number of releases starting of 2020, end of 2020. Essentially, the access to APIs based on HTTP basic authentication will eventually be out of maintenance by 2nd of June this year. And a new date has been released for the eventually for the deletion or complete decommission by 2026. The dates have been moving around quite a while. Last time it was going to happen September this year. I think SAP and the wider ecosystem is realizing that this is a big task and has pushed out by another 3 years. For those of you who are not really sure about this HTTP basic authentication deprecation, essentially what SAP is trying to avoid is connecting to SuccessFactors APIs through username and password. There are most robust methods for authentication out there, and this is a slow transition into that model. You probably noticed that in some of the products, the change has already started. So if, for example, you take a look into identity authentication, you probably notice that it is now using a certificate-based authentication method, similarly to the connection for point-to-point replication between Employee Central and Payroll has been also moved into a more secure authentication mechanism. And this will keep going until every single connection has been upgraded to from an authentication point of view. So if you need some assistance or you're not quite sure, just get in touch and we'll be helpful to give you a hand. Also, a few other integrations have been deprecated similarly to what happened in the past. A few of them, standard packages that come to time integrations, benefit integrations, and payroll integrations. These will be removed from the discovery page in your CPI tenant. So if you are relying on these to start up and streamline some of your custom integrations, probably is a good time to pop in there and just copy them down into your test tenant, because otherwise this will disappear at some point during the next couple of months. Also, the last deprecation that I wanted to highlight is about the learning integration package with SAP ERP financials integration. Hasn't been very popular, but I know a few customers have been using it in the past to basically do analysis from a cost perspective, cross-checking with learning activities. So if your company is using this integration, you'll probably need to start thinking about adopting a different business scenario. Now let's move away from deprecations and talk about a little bit of the enhancements. So the first one, and relates to APIs, is the compound employee API query, where we have now the option to select fields and segments and not just get the whole shebang. The compound employee API query has been widely used across both a number of standard integration packages delivered by SAP with well-known third-party systems like S4HANA, SAP ERP, HCM, workforce software, Kronos, and many more. At the same time, the compound employee API query may have been used by customers and partners like ourselves to develop a lot of custom integrations. In previous versions, it wasn't possible to extract specific fields and segments from this compound employee API query. As of this release, it is now possible to extract specific fields and also segments from this API. The reason behind this is because this feature is enabling customers to essentially be compliant with general data protection regulations guidelines, and also to limit the data amount transferred between systems as well. Now, moving away from the compound employee API, which tends to get some updates release after release, similarly into the OData API space, there has been a number of enhancements. Just to name a few, the M compensation and M pay component recurring OData APIs have been enhanced with a new property. In case you have a number of occurrences happening on the same day, this new property will allow customers to identify the latest and the valid one. Also, when it comes to work permit APIs, due to the functional changes around the new key that conglomerates the name, the issue date, and expiry date, this has been now translated into the API to work in a similar fashion. And the last enhancement about OData APIs has to do with learning. So there has been some updates to the learning API permissions. So it is fundamental for those customers that are relying on integrations through these OData APIs in learning to verify that permissions are not being impacting your integration use cases. That's probably the best piece of advice that I can give you. Now, moving into also few enhancements that SAP SuccessFactors has made to the ERP integration packages, especially with S/4HANA and SAP ERP HCM. I guess as of this release, what SAP SuccessFactors is trying to do is complement and enhance some of the features in this space because of the slow transition into the cloud. A few examples to name, there is a new option to initiate full load from the program from a replication of employee data from Employee Central. Also, the full transmission start date for the organizational object replication from Employee Central has been moved away from the program and embedded into the configuration. And probably the most important one that I can highlight to you all is now the ability to use buddies as a mapping option for conversion rules. So when you replicate data to Employee Central systems, the format of the fields you could use in the past, things like the check and replace with a string, and so and other features. With this enhancement, you can now also, I guess, in a way, include some ABAP coding, customize some of those conversions rules as well. And last but not least, from an integration point of view, and this is probably opening a lot of doors going forward, it's the integration between SAP SuccessFactors and Microsoft 365. To make things simpler, this is, I would say, a native integration, nothing really super technical that you need to go through, as opposed to other integrations developed by middleware software. There will be a new feature available within Admin Center. It's called Work Tech Configuration, where customers can go and simply integrate the application with Microsoft 365. We'll probably see more enhancements around what activities you could do in MS Teams, whether it's starting a chat from the SuccessFactors system, whether it is interacting with CPM, and so much more to come. Now let's move on into Workzone. For those of you who are not very familiar with Workzone, This is a product for building digital workplace solutions that is here to increase user productivity and engagement. The intent for SAP Workzone is to centralize the access to business applications. And by business applications, it's not just simply SuccessFactors. You can hook any other business application that you can have in your environment, whether it's finance-driven, procurement, and many more, and make these like a one-stop shop for all your users and start consuming processes, informations, communications, and much more. As of this release, few enhancements. The first and probably most important one is that there are new homepage cards now currently available in the SuccessFactors Workzone product. As of this release, there will be new UI integration cards that can be built into workspaces once the administrators of the system has downloaded the package and also enabled these cards. Some examples include the compensation statement, sport awards, congratulations, time for a break, activities, goals, job application, compliance forms. They help us to know you better, part of onboarding 2.0, and also the onboarding guide is now available. As I said, how to turn these features on. First of all, you need to ensure that the latest homepage is being enabled in your instance, which by this time it should. And then the SAP Workzone administrator should have downloaded the new content package that is called HR cards from homepage. And the enablement of these cards has happened as well. The last enhancement when it comes to SAP Workzone, it is that now for the enhanced onboarding guided experience, customers now can preview all the steps during the onboarding guided experience with preset dummy data as part of this release. In the past, you had to use real data. This enhancement is basically providing a better user experience when it comes to preview the work that you're going through. And I'm not sure if we still have some time. I would just want you to highlight a few enhancements in the people analytics, people stories space. As of this release, customers will enjoy a new optimized design mode, as well as a new optimized view mode in store reports. Also, for those of you like myself who enjoy seeing new stories in the content store, learning is going to be added to the group, similarly to what happened with recruiting end of last year. You'll probably need to wait a bit longer because of some technical difficulties on SAP side. So once we go into the productive release, all these enhancements for people stories will be made available into your preview and productive instances. That's probably everything on my side. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dan. Back to you.
Great. Thank you, Jorge. And that pretty much brings us to the rest of the presentation for today. It's been a great time talking together about the first half 2023 release. And I hope that each of you has found each of these items impactful. These are some quick highlights that allow you to dig in more of the areas that are particular to your instance, your company, and your configuration. And we hope that you enjoyed your time with us today, and we hope to see you in the future. Thank you.